Well, one of the few upsides, I suppose, of all of this going on is that the world has become a smaller place. And we've been very conscious of the environmental impact of us all traveling. So one of the benefits is to recognize what we can do through technology. So I had the opportunity to interview Kevin Washington, who is the YMCA USA president earlier last week. And also I've got an opportunity to speak live to Timmy Boutsen from the Flanders from Belgium National Youth Agency, and Marie-Claire from the National Youth Council of Ireland. And just a bit, again, linking to what Diane has said, you know, as well as all the stats and the info, and it's really important to know that, we need to hear and listen to young people, which is very much part of what we are doing in youth work, and also hear from our partners around the world. And the theme of today, resilience and resourcefulness. So we wanted to ask the question, how did that look in a different context? So I think an interview with Kevin is about to play.
Hello, I'm Kevin Washington. I'm the president and CEO of the YMCA of the USA, which is one of the largest nonprofit in the States. Glad to be with you today. It's been devastating. It's been devastating from a number of perspectives. One, as we know, the level of anxiety that COVID-19 has presented has seen in our studies that we've looked at, a 25% increase in even the idea of people between the ages of 18 to 24 committing suicide. And I know that number is higher for our LGBTQ youth. So it really has created a level of anxiety in so many ways. One, through employment. The level of employment has decreased drastically in the area of 15% during the high months of the pandemic. Two, schools. Schools have been destroyed, from virtual to and everything else in between. So their normal life has been upheaved in such a dramatic way. And they're really concerned. We're concerned about the level of mental stress that this has caused them. So it's been very difficult. One of the things that as an organization we've been proud of, but also I think this space has been, one, we've been partnering with local school districts to ensure while they're remote, we've been providing support, not only physically, but emotionally for those young people. Two, we have been working wholeheartedly to really try to develop and get resources to this group of kids. And three, hopefully, as this pandemic tends to, it's continuing showing signs of growing. It hasn't dissipated at all yet. We want to try to get a level of normalcy back to folks as quickly as possible, and working on policies and practices to ensure that as we get through this pandemic, there will be support for those young people on the other side of it. Just like America, the Y has had a renewed focus on racism and racial injustices and systemic racism in our country. Here's what I say all the time. The Y is an American institution. We were founded in 1851. So we reflect all that's good and all that's bad about America. So we have to work to ensure that we are using all the tools and assets that we have to address systemic racism in our organization, in our communities, and in our country. What we're doing, we have a relationship with the People's Institute, which is an anti-racist multicultural organization that we've been working with. What I say to everyone is we're on a journey as an organization, but we can't do that unless we work on ourselves individually, because we got to deal with ourselves first, then our communities, then our country. And so we're on a path to become an anti-racist multicultural organization, but we're starting with training and understanding who we are first, individually, then collectively, then community, then nation. It is and I will tell you, many of the young people in our organization are pushing us to do it in a much more effective and faster way. This is not a journey that's going to happen tomorrow. We're talking about a 400-year journey for America, and at least almost a 200-year journey for the YMCA. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but you got to start on the path, and that's what we're doing right now. The challenges are finding the kind of individuals and staff members who have the empathy and capacity to do this work at a high level, and being able to provide the rewards for them to support that field, because they're not the most highly paid individuals in the world, but we need them more than ever. I'm a clear example for what a good youth worker can do. As I tell everyone, I started in the Y at age 10. I got engaged with, connected with Bill Morton, who was a youth worker. He changed my life. He changed the pattern of my life. Those relationships that young people establish with youth workers can be the kinds of relationships that put them on a path to reach their full potential. So we need them. We have to find ways to ensure that we can pay them in a way that's consistent with what their needs are, and put them in an environment where they can be successful. But more importantly, we have to open up to them. They're going to expect and want more from organizations than they've seen in the past. And that, I think, is going to be a significant challenge for our organizations, like YMCAs and other youth serving organizations.
And that was a short part of a very fascinating interview. I wish I could play all of it. Unfortunately, I can't. But suffice to say, we get into quite a lot of conversations around American politics right now as well. And I imagine Kevin is very keen to vote just now around some of the things that he's dealing with. So thank you to Kerry Riley as well from the YMCA for helping us to set up that interview. So if on screen, if Timmy and Marie-Claire could come onto screen as well, and we can share this screen together, that's fantastic.
100 people.
And, very, very welcome. Just waiting for Timmy as well to be put up on the screen. There we go. Fantastic. And one of the things that everybody shares in common, I'm not so sure about Marie-Claire, but certainly Timmy and Kevin have been in Scotland as well, live at some point, and actually visited the place. Can I assume that's true of you as well?
Yeah, that's true. Two years ago, 2018, before the pandemic.
So we've absolutely been partnering in some projects and programs as well around digital and many other spheres as organizations around mental health and well-being, and that was all pre-COVID. But in terms of Kevin's comments, I wanted to reflect with you how COVID-19 was affecting young people in your country, and maybe I could start with Marie-Claire.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Tim. Delighted to join you this morning. I would say a lot of what he said really resonates strongly with the Irish situation. Overall, the pandemic has had a very negative impact on young people in Ireland, especially those at risk and the most marginalised young people. And through research, we know that they have struggled during the lockdown period with loss of social contact with their peers, the routine, the structure. They've also talked about fears of uncertainty and fears about the future and the impact of the virus on their lives, the economic impact and in things like youth unemployment, which is really high in Ireland. It's at 35.6% or 36.5%. In relation to the pandemic, it has really reinforced a digital divide as well, and that has had an impact in terms of educational disadvantage. I think that young people have found it very difficult during the lockdown to adapt to learning online, and some young people preparing for examinations in some unsuitable and crowded households. So access has been a really big issue, access to the digital supports that exist. And also in relation to connectivity, young people in rural and remote areas have struggled to access digital supports. And I would also say the pandemic has exposed a range of inequalities and exacerbated, a number of vulnerabilities, particularly amongst the at-risk and vulnerable groups. Those at risk, I think, have been most isolated during this pandemic, for sure.
Thank you. And Timmy, what has your experience been of that in Belgium?
Well, a little bit the same. It's hitting the youngsters very hard. You can imagine if you are a young person, you have a lot of first times. First time to travel with your friends, first time to go to school, first time to have a holiday with your friends, maybe a first love that you have, and they cannot do that anymore. So they have a whole lot, another experience of this normal life, or what we call a normal life. And actually, because I don't know if you know it, but we are in our second lockdown since last Friday. And there is a hashtag popping up on Twitter amongst the youngsters, and that's Generation Lockdown. So we can surely speak about a generation lockdown.
That's really interesting, Timmy. And I think reflecting back on the public health discussion, I don't know if you saw any of that, but that balance of the spread of the risk, but the harms that are impacted as we lock down on young people, it's a very, very tough moral choices that are being made, as well as public health choices in that space. Timmy, if I could come back to you and ask the question about how the youth work sector has responded to this.
Well, we actually had our first respondents in the first lockdown in March and April. We had three concerns. One was that we need to put in the perspective of young children, because everything was closed. And actually now the politicians also say to us, we actually forgot about the young people. So in the exit strategy in May and in June, the first thing was to put together a process with the politicians and also the virologists, if I say that correct, what we can do to give some more space to young people again. So that was the first concern. Second concern was what to do with the primary holiday, the summer holiday in July and August. So we did everything again with the politicians and the virologists to make that happen. And that actually worked. We made some protocols, we made some rulings that all the activities, that are about more than 20,000 activities for young people in summer, that they can happen. We worked in bubbles of 50. And the third thing was what we more call, because in Flanders we have a lot of just normal leisure activities. We also call that youth work, and we also got what we more call the youth welfare. The youth work that is more busy with welfare. Actually, we responded very quickly to open up some things for youth workers, that they can still see young people one-to-one, or that they can still do activities with small groups of 8 persons.
And over to Marie-Claire, one of the discussions I remember having with Mary was around essential workers way back, and she said that there was a new term in youth work in Ireland that was used because you didn't, like the rest of us, we were battling as to whether we should be seen or not seen as essential workers. Did you want to say a bit about that and how the sector has responded?
I think, yes, that's absolutely right. It's been challenging. It's been very challenging. And I think that's reflected really in the review that we did of the sector response, which showed that, 14% of organizations couldn't provide a service during this period of lockdown, the first lockdown. We're in our second lockdown now. And 59% saw a significant decline in the number of young people whom they previously engaged with. But we also saw extraordinary creativity and adaptability and innovation throughout the country. Organizations really stepped up. They facilitated young people to, mainly through digital supports, through mental health, social media campaigns to promote mental health and positive well-being. They engaged in distribution of food hampers, care packages, loads of activity packs. Young people were writing letters to older people in their communities. They were making knitted hearts to distribute to patients in hospitals. They were making PPE, thank you videos for frontline workers. So much good youth work practice, it's documented in the report that's available. But the challenges, I think, are something that we can really reflect and learn on. I think they really, as Timmy mentioned, related to buildings being closed, organizations really not having the digital infrastructure in place, to make that switch to digital youth work, and also a reluctance on the part of some young people to engage online, and again challenges engaging with at-risk and marginalized young people. So I think we've really learned a lot from this period, and it's really highlighted significant challenges. Positives are that we have really can see through working with policy allies in policy fields and other agencies, the value and the pivotal role the sector continues to play in supporting young people and really mitigating the impact of this virus in their lives. And young people themselves have talked about the importance of youth work as really a lifeline to them. But it's been very challenging.
Great, thank you so much. I'm very conscious of time, so we did want to get into wider discussions, but I think they will be followed up in some of the workshops, especially around the important issue of racial equality. So I believe there's one workshop coming up as well, and we'll focus again on that tomorrow. But given we're moving towards coffee break time, I'm going to put you under pressure and say one challenge and one opportunity for youth work going forward. So one challenge and one opportunity. Over to Timmy.
Well, the challenge, Marie-Claire also said it, the challenge is digital youth work. I think we can still learn a lot about that. Sometimes youth workers respond, digital is not the thing to do because we want to have physical contact, but we saw last year that it is possible. So that's a really challenge. What's the opportunity? Well, here in Flanders, we got a lot of attention because in the first lockdown, the perspective of young people was just forgotten. And because of the work that we did with youth work organizations, that perspective has brought back to the politicians. And they agreed, like, we forgot it in the first lockdown. We now try to have some measurements that they still can have their open spaces. They still can do things in this second lockdown. And that proves the importance of youth work organizations that have to raise the voice of young people. So that's the opportunity.
Okay, Marie-Claire.
Tim, I think it's very similar. It's the need to kind of build that digital support, but not lose the face-to-face youth work, which is so important. And I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword. As you know, we've had years of underinvestment in the sector, and I think although there's a real value on the role of youth work, we need to make sure that there is a sustained investment to support youth workers and build capacity and have that blended approach to youth work, which uses face-to-face, but also incorporates the positive aspects of digital youth work as well.
Great. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time and zooming into us, and hopefully we'll do the same. I'm sure there's lots of other connections you have with many organizations that are here at the conference that they will also want to make contact with you after today. So thanks again.